Alright, let's get going here. I mentioned previously that we would be taking a triangle, a right triangle, and be putting it inside of a circle. Well, that's what we're going to do today. And what we're going to see is this is a super powerful tool for helping us to evaluate the trig functions, how to find what the values are. So let's take a look here. What we're going to do is we're going to put a triangle inside what I call the perfect circle. A perfect circle here means that it has a radius of 1. Well, if the radius is 1, then the hypotenuse, that's going to always be the hypotenuse of the triangle that we create. So we're always going to have a hypotenuse of 1. And now if you can see visually here what's going to happen is cosine is always going to refer to our x value and sine is always going to refer to our y, the up and down. And here's why. So sine of some angle, t, is opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, well, the hypotenuse is 1, so that doesn't really have anything to do with it. So sine is equal to the opposite. Well, look, in the way we're putting this inside of the circle, the opposite is always going to be the value of y. And then in the same way, cosine of t is going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse, but the hypotenuse is always 1. So cosine is going to equal the adjacent. Well, the way we put this in the triangle, the adjacent is always going to be x. So the values x, y along the outside of this circle are really the same thing as cosine, well, cosine of t, sine of t, whatever that angle is. Do you follow that logic? It's super important. Okay, so this is what they're saying here. The xy always correspond to the cosine and the sine. So that's what I just was showing you on the previous slide and why that would be. Because the hypotenuse is 1, it's going to drop out. It's going to make adjacent is going to always be cosine. Opposite is always going to be sine. Okay, so we have some values here. They're not telling us the angle yet. We'll get back to this. But the point on the circle is the point 1/2 the cube root of 3 over 2. Well, it's cosine and sine. So cosine is 1/2, sine is the square root of 3 over 2, because this is the x and this is the y. This is the cosine, this is the sine. So here we go. Okay, so they've given us another point here. Now they didn't tell us the name of the angle, but we don't need it, because what they're asking is what is the value of the cosine and what's the value of the sine? Well, the cosine is the x, the sine is the y, so cosine of t must be equal to negative square root of 2 over 2. Sine of t must be equal to the square root of 2, the positive square root of 2 over 2. Okay, now let's think through that same logic and let's put some of them right on the axis. So if I have an angle of 90, look what that would be. I have nothing happening in the x direction and I'm up 1 step in the y. Do you agree with that? Remember, we said this unit circle has a radius of 1. So this would be where I'd be at an angle of 90 degrees. So if I can't put a triangle in there, all I've got is just this, I've only got the vertical. So if the cosine is the x and there is no x, it must be 0. There is no x, we just go straight up. And if y is the sine and we go straight up, then the sine of 90 must be 1. Okay, let's think through the same logic again. This time our angle is pi, so we've switched to radians, but that's just going back this way. It's right here. Okay, well, what's happening now? Well, we can't make a full triangle. All I have is, I have a x direction. This is the point negative 1, 0. So the cosine of pi, because that's the x value, so we've got an x, it's a negative 1, and the sine of pi must be 0, because we didn't have any up or down. It's all horizontal. Okay, that's almost the end of this section here, just to get us started with the idea of a unit circle. That's what we'll spend most of our time, I think, in section 7.3 on. They're just saying, hey, let's go ahead and see how to crunch these on a calculator. I think you've probably already been doing this. So they're just showing us we can punch them in here, 5 pi over 3. Now just be careful, if you put this in, you need to be in radian mode or you're not going to get the right value. And we get the value of cosine there. So they give us another one here. So I guess I'll do this. Now hold on, I'm in the wrong mode here, so I gotta switch to radians. So sine of pi divided by 3. Okay, and I get 0.866. Okay, that was it. So now the unit circle is the main idea. Obviously, I think you can figure out how to punch that in your calculator. The unit circle is the main idea. What we're thinking of is we're putting that triangle inside of there. And the x, this is the key before we move on. The key is that x is always going to be cosine, y is always going to be sine. So if you have an ordered pair on this unit circle, then the first term there, the x term, is cosine, and the second term is the sine.